This week on the WriterCon podcast,
trust your gut.
Welcome to WriterCon, a gathering place for writers to share their knowledge about writing and the writing world. Your hosts are William Bernhardt, best-selling novelist and author of the Red Sneaker books on writing, and Lara Bernhardt, award-winning author of the Wantland Files book series.
Hey writers, due to some scheduling conflicts, we're essentially taking a vacation from podcasting this week, but it's giving us an opportunity to release this very special interview we did a while back with Alida Winternheimer. Alida is, I call my first Substack friend. She's someone that I became acquainted with after we started distributing WriterCon Magazine on Substack, which, by the way, you can still subscribe to. Just go to Substack and punch in WriterCon and it will come up. And you know what else will come up? Alida's. I think it's a blog called A Room Full of Books and Pencils. Alida is an award-winning writer and developmental editor. She's a Best American Essays Notable. She is a 3-time Pushcart nominated author, like my wife, Lara. When she is not writing or reading, she says you can find her kayaking or sailing, or cycling rather, or walking her golden retriever. So sit back and enjoy this very special interview with the wonderful Alida Winternheimer. Alida, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, we have a traditional first question, so here it is. If you could offer writers one piece of advice, what would it be?
Well, it probably changes day to day and depending on who is asking. Right. But today I'm going to say, trust your gut. You know, I work with so many writers who say, I heard this, I got this piece of advice. They say my writing group told me, and then they go down the path of trying to fix their manuscript according to that certain piece of advice, as though that piece of advice is gospel. And usually there's a lot we need to unpack to those words of wisdom to really understand them and make them work for us and for our stories. And so my approach to storycraft begins with trusting that the story wants us to tell it, and the story has demands it places on us as storytellers. So trust your gut, and then go do some more digging. Find out, was that piece of advice really warranted? Does it make sense? Should I follow it? Should I maybe get some other advice or dig deeper so I understand it better, instead of just taking it at face value and running with it?
That is really good advice. I presented at a conference this past weekend, and I had someone sit down with me and really had kind of come to a point of near paralysis because they were receiving conflicting advice from varying sources. And that's kind of what you said. I said something very similar to this writer, that not every piece of advice needs to be applied. So think about your book and what's going to best serve it. So that's excellent. Thank you for that.
Don't reject anything out of hand, but that doesn't mean you have to do everything you hear either.
Right, exactly.
Now, Alida, you and I are kind of Substack. You may be the first Substack friend I've had on the podcast. But we met because, of course, we're doing the WriterCon Magazine through Substack now and the newsletter. And you have a terrific writing newsletter or essay or column or whatever you want to call it. And that caught my attention to such a degree that I asked you to write something for the magazine, which will be coming out soon. But anyway, tell us about what you're doing on Substack.
Thank you. Yeah, so my Substack is called A Room Full of Books and Pencils, and it's at booksandpencils.substack.com, and it is my home for reflections on life, writing, and the writing life. You know, before I found Substack, I had a MailChimp, and I tried to do the newsletter thing, and I just hated it because it felt like a grind and like whistling in the wind and such, and I wanted to... I don't like marketing. I'm not comfortable with that. I do like self-expression and sharing and connecting with people.
Nice.
So on Substack, I've got those 3 columns and I can reflect on things in life that matter to me. I'm not going to tell you what kind of lunch I'm eating, right? I might
No
tell
pictures?
you, no, not my style. But, I have some posts about my father's dementia. So that's in the life category. And then I write about what I'm doing as an author in the writing life category and my own thoughts, what I'm pursuing. And then I've got the writing category where I do storycraft and writing tips and share and connect with other writers. So that gets more into the nuts and bolts of sharing what I do as a developmental editor and story coach.
And I mean, it really is a terrific Substack, and I recommend it to everyone. But you just mentioned coaching. I think you do a lot of coaching, and you even got an event coming up relating to that, right?
Correct. Yes. So I've got a, so I call it fiction group coaching, but I've got a memoirist in the group already, and it is definitely open to novelists and memoirists, but basically long form book length narrative projects. And it's a 3-month summer session beginning on May 29th. And so if people want more information, it's at wordessential.com/fiction coaching. And it starts with a discovery call. So I would just hop on Zoom with somebody and we would talk. I also do free office hours through wordessential.com, which is my editing and coaching business. So I'm really available to people for free to talk story craft, to just connect and give back. Yeah.
No, that's wonderful. And we'll put all those links in the show notes so people don't have to race for their pencils unless they just want to.
Yeah.
You also, of course,
you.
write books, and I think you've got one coming up pretty soon. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So the book coming up is called A Stone's Throw, and it is women's fiction with magical realism. Let me see if I can recall the tagline from memory here, but it's 2 women an ocean apart. I'm going to flub it a little bit, but you'll get the gist. One is a motherless child. The other is a childless mother, and they are brought together through this magical painting coming to life to experience the real true meaning of creativity. So that was very poorly
No, it
off the
sounds
cuff.
That sounds very intriguing. I love women's fiction, so that sounds fantastic. We have a lot of aspiring writers in our audience. Would you describe your path to publication? How did you get started?
Sure. So, oh gosh, my
Is it the
journey.
deep breath story?
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah. I want to say sadly, but maybe it's not sad. It just happens to be long. I mean, I'm one of those lifelong writers, one of those children who always had a book or a pencil in her hand. And writing my whole life, but then I got my MFA. I went to graduate school in 2006 or so, got my first master's degree. Then I went straight into an MFA in creative writing program, graduated that in 2012. And so all along the way, I was applying for artist grants and residencies and workshops and having, some of your kind of typical success and rejection stuff. In 2012, after I got my MFA, I started working professionally as a developmental editor and story coach. And that was when I put out A Stone's Throw the first time. So this novel is a relaunch. And I indie published 3 novels and 2 craft books, The Storyworks Guide to Character and The Storyworks Guide to Point of View. Right, so 5 books indie published. Right. And then I have a historical manuscript, and a New York agent who I met through a pitch conference signed me for the historical novel. So then he told me he wouldn't be able to sell my book with my indie novels on the market, instructed me to take them off the market and bury their digital footprint, which it turns out is actually impossible.
Yeah, I was
But
gonna say, good luck with that.
yeah, I spent plenty of time and money trying to scrub them from search results and such, and you really can't. And Amazon won't take the page down, and Goodreads won't take, it's a nightmare. So now that's far enough behind me. I am relaunching those 3 novels, and then once they're out, I'll get my historical novel into the world. I'm working on my 3rd craft book, the plot book. So I've got a lot of irons in the fire, and I'm hoping to, bring multiple stories to readers.
Sounds like you're staying busy.
Yes.
Well, I'm glad you are recouping and coming back from what sounds like was a rough-ish experience. I'm sorry you went through that.
Advice, but
Thank you. Yeah.
Not great advice. But like, what were we just talking about at the beginning? We have to sometimes, but we don't know what we don't know. So it's hard to know which advice when we're first starting out is going to best serve us. That's difficult.
Right. Yeah, it is hard to know which advice serves us. And it's also hard, I think, when you've got a certain dream. You've got an idea of what being a published author looks like. And it's something you've fostered, for me at least, from childhood.
I'm right there with you. I know exactly what you're describing. I do. There's still a piece of me that remembers when that was the only way and the only dream. And it kind of festers. I understand.
Yeah, it does. And so, right. And when somebody dangles that dream in front of you and makes the promise of, this is going to be big, it's going to be translated, I love it. You're like, give me more. Okay, tell me what to do. And then it just didn't play out. So,
well, what does a typical writing day look like for you? What's your writing process?
Yeah, so it depends on the day and on the projects I've got going on. Right now, I'm preparing for the launch of A Stone's Throw. So that's taking up a lot of time and energy. But ideally, my day starts with the morning coffee and the work in progress with actual creative output and generating words toward the next manuscript. And if I'm not in drafting mode, I might be doing research for it or revision, but it's that project. I like to place that first in my day. And then by mid-morning, I usually start shifting gears and focusing on work for clients. So that's a lot of mental energy and creative output, but it's going into very different buckets.
Yes, I understand.
Yeah. And the task things like managing my website or formatting a book, those things I kind of put at the end of the day. So I focus on when my energy is most available to me. I want to give that time of day to the biggest project.
No, that's smart. And figuring out what that time is, because it's not the same for everyone, right?
Right. Very true. Yeah.
Well, I always ask our guests if they are a pantser or a planner. I would guess, just listening from you talk, I would guess you're a planner, but is that correct?
Planner, yes. Yeah, I would say planner. I would not say plotter. So it's interesting you chose the word planner. I have a whole process I developed that I call storyboarding, which is not a unique word, and everybody develops similar processes for plotting their novels. But it's a written, a verbal type of storyboarding like they do in the films with the pictures on the wall. And it gives me a narrative journey through the story I'm planning, but it doesn't feel rigid. Just saying outlining feels constricting to me. And then as I go, I've got my plan in mind, but I let myself veer from it as things happen during the drafting process. So I find myself creating a tool and using it as I go, but I never let it restrict what I do while I'm actually drafting.
Absolutely. And I think that is something, I know that's something I hear a lot. And we very frequently will say, however you're preparing for it, also be prepared that the story will probably change. It will very likely change as you're writing it. That's how we do. We get better ideas as we're going, or get to know the characters better. Things will change along the way. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah.
Well, Alida, you already told us about a couple of things you've got coming up, but beyond that, long term, where are you going with Substack and your books? What should we look for from you next?
Well, long term, I feel like it's always evolving, but definitely
Yes, because it
those.
is.
Yes. So after A Stone's Throw, the other books I'm relaunching are Ghost Story Murder Mysteries. So those will be the next relaunches to come. And then Plot, the third craft book, and my historical novels need to come out, but also I'm always developing coaching and workshops and connecting with writers, one-on-one manuscript critiques, group coaching, classes. I have a lot of offerings, and we'll see. I have some ideas that lean more toward community than coaching, but they're too undeveloped to speak about yet.
Sounds interesting.
So,
and look for you in WriterCon Magazine, of course, as well.
Of course, yeah. I'm excited for that piece to come out, and I hope people will come back with questions. And I love follow-up. I love interacting. I love answering questions.
Yes, that much is evident. Alida, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Oh, thank you. It was really my pleasure.
Well, great. And if you want to learn about the retreat or the conference or any of the other things we do at WriterCon, go to the website. It's writercon.com. All right? Thanks for listening, everybody. And hey, remember, keep writing. You cannot fail if you refuse to quit. See you next time.